Well, I want to welcome you all tonight. My name is John Williams. I'm going to try and keep to the script here that Margita gave me, but no guarantees. I have the privilege of serving as the chairman of the board for the Orange County Community Foundation, who's hosting the event today. Because of the paltry pay as a volunteer, I also have a real job, which is I'm a partner at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher, an international law firm where I've been for the last 35 years practicing in mergers and acquisitions. And as a result, this kind of program is very near and dear to my heart, since over my career I've probably done 1,000 or more transactions. So something that I always enjoy talking about. During the course of my career and doing many deals, a lot of times I represented public companies or private equity, but I also got to work with a lot of founders with the sale of their companies. And honestly, that was, to me, one of the more rewarding parts of what I did. And part of it's because it's much more personal when you're a founder selling your business. And so as opposed to being simply a legal advisor, I also found myself as a business advisor and sometimes as a priest. But anyway, it's exciting to have such a great turnout with all of you today. I'm told that the audience today is about a third business owners, about a third advisors to business owners, and then a mix of other community organizations, investor community, other foundations. So welcome you all to join us today. Let me just point out that we have some of our key leadership here. Shelley Haas, our CEO of 25 years. So our objective today is really to share some experiences and to learn from some others who have sold their businesses or have advised those in selling their businesses. We hope to provide some insights, tips, and lessons learned so that you can make best decisions for yourself personally. Now, on the little script that I was given, there was a thing that says, add some insights and tips from your experience. Now, if I were to really want to do that, there would be no time for the panelists, so I'm going to limit myself to just 2 points that I think are incredibly important. The first one of those is pre-planning. Having witnessed this many, many times, I can tell you that almost every deal that I've been involved with has something in common, and that is that the outcome and the value are shaped long before that letter of intent gets signed. If you're thinking about selling a business, you want to start a year, maybe 2 years in advance, because there's so much structuring that can be done, so much planning that can be done to not only increase the value, but also make sure that you have less of potential liabilities after the transaction. There's also some charitable planning that you can do, which allows you to pay the government less and donate more of your funds. So that's obviously a huge benefit. The second point that I would make is that I think founders often underestimate the personal nature of selling your business. It's really not just a financial transaction, it's a life transition. I've had the good fortune of staying friends with a number of the founders that I have worked with over the years. And I can tell you that you definitely want to give some thought to what life looks like after you close your deal. Waking up one day without the stress of owning and operating your own business and having a larger bank account sounds like nirvana. But I will tell you, after having witnessed this many times, that the transition from one side to the other can really be jarring. You wake up all of a sudden with a very different life than you had the day before you sold your business. And so that thoughtfulness and that planning and preparing yourself, I think, is hugely important. So this afternoon, Margita Labhard, who's our Senior Director for Philanthropic Strategy at the Foundation, she'll be moderating our panel. And after that, we're going to hear from Matt Petroski, who's with Armanino, a CPA firm, and he's going to talk about some tax advantage strategies that you can use during an exit. So with that, Margita, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It is such a pleasure to see so many familiar faces and also so many new ones. Both a wonderful scenario. So OCCF has been around for 36 years, and during that time, we've built incredible bonds and relationships with entrepreneurs and investors who, as John has said, have had the benefit of being able to plan philanthropically during their business exits and set a path for life after the transition. And we know the importance of this milestone event, and we are very committed annually to host an event on this topic, all with little different themes. And the truth be told, as John said, we could talk about this for hours on end. There are so many different components of the sale. So today we're going to be dabbling on pre-planning, value creation, a little bit about negotiation, and then life after the exit. And we hope that you will be inspired by the lived experiences of our esteemed panelists today. I would like to mention that we will be having Q&A. If you feel compelled to pose questions along the way, if the moment is right, feel free. Otherwise, we will have Q&A after the panel, so you can hold your questions then. And I'm absolutely delighted to moderate the panel today. We have 4 esteemed panelists that are experts in their own right, and their experiences and best practices, both pros and cons, will be super insightful. So without further ado, I'll introduce everybody one by one. Shirin Behzadi. She is a former CEO of Home Franchise Concepts, an Entrepreneur of the Year award winner for OCBJ and many other awards, as you can imagine. She's recently an author, mentor, and so much more. Shirin, welcome. Linda Igarashi is also a panelist with us today. She is an esteemed corporate M&A partner with Sheppard Mullin, providing trusted advice to business buyers and sellers during their transactions. Linda, please welcome. Bill Koschak is joining us as the founder of Everest Advisors, providing strategic advisory services to companies looking to grow and sell. Bill, welcome. And last but not least, Joe Freese is the former president and CEO of Fontis Solutions, a marketing service provider and also an ESOP managed organization. He's got a ton of know-how and knowledge in the ESOP space. So Joe, welcome. I'd like to start off the event with a small introduction by each of you, just a couple minutes that might tell your story, how you got into this field and space, whatever you'd like to tell us. Linda, would you like to start?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Margita. I'm a corporate M&A partner at Sheppard Mullin. My focus is on complex transactions, representing founders, sellers, as well as private equity firms, family offices, and public and private companies. So it's a very general practice, industry agnostic. The first chapter of my career was really as a financial analyst and management consultant. I spent nearly a decade before law school working, and it really helped me prepare me for my practice in just being more of a business partner as well as an M&A lawyer. So I really take my M&A practice and keep my business hat on as well, which I think has been very helpful and very additive to my practice. And in terms of just on a more personal note, my first experience really with founders was, I'm the daughter of immigrants who were small business owners, and I think I always really kind of think about when I'm working with my clients, protecting their assets really as if it's my own, and advocating for them. So thank you for having me.
Shirin.
All right. I'm Sherin Behzadi, and when I was thinking about this session, I was reminded of the day I made my way to our final management presentation to who was going to be our potential PE partners. It was at the end of a very long process. We were entrepreneurs. We had spent a lot of years growing the company, trials and tribulations. We had grown to a couple of brands, and we thought it was time for us to sell and exit and walk off to the sunset. So I remember that day in New York when row after row of PE partners walked in, and I thought, woof, there's a lot on me, because everybody relied on me presenting a very compelling case for our company. But luckily, I had had such experience with adversity that didn't rattle my cage. I was born and raised in Iran and fled as a 17-year-old by myself. No parents, no money, nothing. Found my way to the United States and started working as a gas station cashier in Pomona behind bulletproof glass. Very poor, but even then, I remember telling people, someday I'm gonna run a big company. And that mobilized me. Decades later, we ended up growing a company, Home Franchise Concepts, and that day I was sitting in that room making a case. We were successful. But we got a call a couple of days later that said, well, everybody else can be bought out, but you have to stay on, Shirin, and you have to run it to the expectations that you set forth in the SIM. So we did. So at end of 2015, here I was. Most of the C-level bench was bought out. So I was CEO, CIO, CFO, CMO, and COO of a sizable company. We had just raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and we had to live up to those expectations. The next few years, we left no stones unturned. We created the platform of brands that work synergistically together. We grew additional companies, we bought companies, and by 2019, I thought it was time to exit. We had a robust exit. By the time we sold, end of 2019, our franchises were operating out of 12,000 cities. They were installing 70,000 units a week. So we were sizable. After we sold, this one was to a strategic. I have since been working with, as board director, as advisor, to companies, to private equity firms, of course, do philanthropic work. I ended up, therefore, writing a book as a guide, something that I wish I had as I was growing up through the ranks, called The Unexpected CEO, which is currently a national bestseller. So thank you.
Congratulations.
My mission is to help others build and grow their business, so here we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirin.
Good afternoon. My name's Joe Fries. I am currently the president of Navy Blue Group, which is a consulting practice in Orange County that works with C-level executives on strategic growth strategies, and a fair amount of time that migrates into work and helping people figure out exits for their business and what they want to do personally in their life. Prior to that, I spent 26 years building a business in Orange County. I bought 3 companies, ultimately sold mine. We can talk. I know today we're going to talk about planning. Our planning mostly came through the process of buying 3 companies, but ultimately one day, one of the companies I was pursuing looked at me and said, "We want to buy you." It was a large public company out of Minnesota, and we were a 100% ESOP company at that point, and we made a decision to sell and took the company through a process to sell the business. Margita, thanks for calling me an expert. I'm by no means an expert. I've got a fair amount of life experiences. I may be able to be helpful. I come here today to share, but by no means any expertise in the area. And the balance of my time today, I do some consulting work, and then I sit on a board of DP Nicolai, which is a construction company up in Portland, Oregon, and Ubix Labs, which is a AI software company in Irvine, California.
Thank you, Joe. And Bill, last but not least.
Thank you. Bill Koschak from Everest Advisors. Our firm has 30 people nationwide. We are a firm of corporate executives. We come in and help run companies and functions. Their company sizes are anywhere from 0 in revenue, so pre-revenue life sciences startups, all the way to $700 million public company, where we are the CFO of that organization. Industry ownership type doesn't affect us, and we have some amazing people, a couple of whom are here today with me. And thinking about today and why should I be sitting up here, one of the questions I ask everybody who joins Everest is, how many transactions have you worked on? How much money have you raised? How many M&A transactions you've been involved in? My background is 14 years at KPMG, 10 years at General Mills, where I was a partner in financial services at KPMG. I worked with large private and public companies. I spent time after that when I was at Mills as a chief accounting officer, and then a business unit CFO. Then I went on a journey that led me to Everest. I was a PE portfolio company CFO. I worked for Medtronic for 2 years, and then I went and worked for and then sold a public company through a reverse merger. I've worked on over $45 billion of M&A transactions, both buying and selling companies. One really big one drove the number, $38 billion, the merger of Norwest with Wells Fargo. But I've done carve-outs, I've done reverse mergers, I've done portfolio company sales, all sorts of different types of transactions. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a ton, and I've met some great people along the way, including everybody up here. Joe and I actually had a story that revolves around the Minnesota company, which is how we got here.
Well, I love the Minnesota connection. I'm also from Minnesota. So thank you, Bill, for that introduction. Okay, getting into the topic of pre-planning. So my first question would be to you, Bill. As you think about, we often hear that founders and leaders should get their house in order before they're sharing materials with potential buyers. What does that really mean? What's involved in cleaning things up to prepare for a sale?
Well, how much time do I have?
I know.
I'll stick to finance. Everybody else up here has some other thoughts. I'm sure from a legal perspective, HR, there's a number of other areas. But, one of the things that I think if you think about from the financials, you hear this a lot. What does it mean? And I'm going to go deep into the weeds on you. How many people know what a chart of accounts is, right? A chart of accounts is how you organize all your financial data. It starts there. I've implemented them at big companies like General Mills where we didn't have something consistent. But buyers want to see consistency over time in how you record transactions. And that starts with how you put things through your transaction processing or the filter, which is your chart of accounts. Then it's all about following GAAP, right? You can't try to sell your business and be on a method of accounting other than GAAP because most acquirers have that as the way they account for things. So, for example, we got involved with a company this summer that I'm not sure what their method of accounting was. It wasn't cash, and it wasn't GAAP. I just saw the Eagles last weekend in Vegas, and Hotel California was the first song, right? I told the guy who owned the business, your inventory method of accounting is like Hotel California. Things go in, and they never leave, right? And so you have to be following GAAP, have robust accounting policies that allow you to do things. Revenue recognition is critical. In that particular business's case, again, we got them, we restated 4 years of financials for them. We got them to a point, we couldn't get them to all the way compliant with GAAP because we couldn't do percentage of completion accounting. Complicated businesses require that. That's something that's important. You better know what EBITDA is. Right? I've got a business that I'm working with personally. He didn't know what EBITDA was. We had to calculate for him, and we had to adjust it to pull out all of his owner's expenses and things like that. Do all the things like that to get yourself ready. You'll hear terms get thrown at you like quality of earnings. I'm sure many of you have heard that. That's nothing more than somebody coming in to look at what you've done and tell the buyers that you've got things like where are the skeletons, right? And so that's another thing that getting ready, being ready there is something else that's important. Getting your ratios and your metrics and understanding what they are, looking at your receivables and getting them collected before you get to a sale. All of these things help you. There's so many other aspects to it, but I think I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Margita.
Thank you, Bill. I know we could go on and on. So, Linda, I'd love to turn this next question to you. From your vantage point as an M&A lawyer, how early do most founders actually start thinking about company structure and legal readiness for a sale? And with that, when they don't plan ahead and define their goals in preparation for an exit, what are the main issues that end up limiting their options or negotiating leverage?
So in terms of how early, in our experience, it's never soon enough, right? There's always more time, or they should have come to us sooner, right? So I think, John was saying in his introduction, ideally we really do like to see, companies, founders, engage legal counsel at least 1 to 2 years before they're going to actually do an exit, right? So sometimes small businesses, founders have a small solo, and this is not to solo attorney who's been helping them form their company and do some small contracting work. But it's really different, when you engage legal counsel who's experienced in deals and can help you navigate the diligence process. So I would put in terms of like readiness or where we see our clients fall kind of into three buckets. Those that really do come to us 1 to 2 years ahead of time, engage us and start working with us to really try to clean things up, really plan ahead and look under the hood before somebody else does. And then there's the other group that, comes to us just before they're about to engage, their investment banker. And our first order of business is to negotiate that investment banker engagement letter. And we can work with that too, but usually that's sort of, they're 6 months before, kicking off a process. So it's there's still enough time there for us to do some light legal diligence. And then there's those who come to us after they've already signed an LOI. And that's really painful because there's just, you've lost so much leverage at that point. And, sometimes founders don't think of lawyers as helping them negotiate the deal. But there's a lot that we can put into an LOI to help when you have the most leverage. And then in terms of, when sellers skip this pre-sale checkup, I call it, the issues that we see are really, it's sort of like you don't have your house in order. It's messy corporate records, unclear ownership. Sometimes they've had handshake deals with family members, and those need to be papered. Hopefully before the buyer gets in there and sees that. Missing, confidentiality and IP assignments, things like that later, are going to give buyers heartburn, and just, regulatory and compliance issues that had we had time to kick the tires in advance, we would have identified and found creative solutions to not spook a buyer.
Thank you, Linda. So, Shirin, we know that finding the right trusted advisors is a best practice when planning for an exit. So my question to you would be, did you use any trusted advisors, whether it be investment bankers, accountants, other legal advisors in the process? And if so, did it pay off?
Absolutely. We use them all. Accountants, tax accountants, attorneys, investment bankers. We even brought in consultants to help us understand the industry, the data in the industry, our reputation within the industry. And we did take 2 years before we decided to land on the right partner. It's very important. We knew we're entrepreneurs. We understood our space. We knew how to grow our company. But we also knew what we didn't know. We were not in the world of creating transactions, knowing the right connections, negotiating the right way. So with all of that in mind, we thought we were going to get the best help we can possibly get. Even though we're audited every year, we had a robust accounting system. To your point, we still had EY do our quality of earnings review. Why that's important is that, one, it gets your house in order, but also it helps position the company appropriately. They were able to call out potential concerns ahead of time, getting us to prepare for what maybe an investor and a buyer be looking at. As an example, this is 2015. One of the topics they brought up was, how did you fare during the Great Recession? Now, we had the data. We knew we did well, but we weren't yet ready to present the data in a fashion and in a light that would be helpful to the buyers. By going through that practice, we were ready. We could set the stage, and therefore we could find an opening with investors that may not have looked at us initially because we were in home improvement, and that's considered volatile in recession times. So it was, one, helpful to focus us, but also created an opportunity for us to present our case to more folks. And lastly, they helped us negotiate. So one would think, this is my price. If I hire all these advisors, it's that price minus what I paid those advisors. In reality, if you get the right advisors in place, the right investment bankers to negotiate on your behalf, the price is not that price. It's going to be substantially higher because they have a larger network. They know how to present the case. And when it comes to negotiating, especially if you're going to stay on board, and that I did, you don't want to be negotiating with your potential partners. You want somebody else to be the bad guy to step in the middle and negotiate. So yes, it paid off, and we used it in all of our transactions.
Thank you so much. And Joe, same question for you.
I would say absolutely. I think you got to look both at external advisors and internal. You know, when I was super lucky. I had an internal team that was super strong. I had a very, very good CFO in my business. I think as you start preparing to sell your business, you got to look around the team that surrounds you, particularly when you're a CEO of a business. You know, look at your key people that are advisors to you and say, is that team strong enough to take it through a process? Now, if you have the run-up, you know, you got to make the necessary corrections because those people are going to be super valuable to you in that process of taking your company out to sell. And then on the other side, yeah, I always had good law firms, you know, helping us do transactions. I think good lawyers bring a lot of value to the equation. I think they open your eyes to things that you're not going to think through. You know, I knew how to run my business, but I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know how to weave my way through a set of documents. So you got to have both. You got to have good internal people, and you got to have outside advisors.
Thank you, Joe. So in your book, The Unexpected CEO, you talk about value creation for the franchise business, and specifically the secret sauce. Can you define what the secret sauce is?
Ooh, value creation is what I'm really passionate about. I've spoken about this topic to many groups and a lot of entrepreneurs. Every single one of us sitting here in this room are here because we're successful. There is a combination of factors that put together has created your success, especially for a company. There are pillars and foundational approaches that, when you accumulate them together, create an opportunity for a business to thrive. As a business owner, as an operator, or as someone who's consulting with one of your clients, you have got to know what those are. Why? Because one, if you can eloquently express and describe what those are, it helps the organization grow. That's number one. Our mission, when we're running a company as leaders, as CEOs, CFOs, leaders of companies, is to give the opportunity for the company to grow as much as it can. You have got to understand what those pillars are. What are those buckets? And be able to then clearly explain it to someone else. So an investor coming in needs to be able to visualize themselves in your shoes and say, if I do these things, I can have a reasonable return on my investment. As an example, when we were doing one of our transactions, the larger transaction at the back end, we had done all of the great groundwork. We had done a lot of negotiating. We were getting close. We thought, okay, we can push this number a little bit higher. We were sitting there with the CEO and the team of the acquiring company, and the CEO asked me this question. He said, Shirin, if we invest another $25 million, which compared to the value of the company wasn't that large, but it was a good number, how would we see a return on investment? He just wanted to see, if I could understand, if I could eloquently explain how to grow the company. Because we had very clear understanding of what it would take, I was immediately able to tell them, of the $25 million, this is where the investments are going to be. This is going to be the return that you would get. Therefore, he could see what growth could look like if they were to take over. And I firmly believe that's part of the reason we got the high end of the value that we were looking for. So basically, the point is, even though in the book I'm talking about our secret sauce, I want to say everybody has a secret sauce. And that's a secret sauce that you need to know, you need to focus on, you need to have your entire team focus on. And when it comes to transactions, you've got to be able to explain it well.
Thank you so much, Shirin. And Joe, from your experience, what would you say the role of processes and financials and operations have in driving up value?
I think they bring tremendous value. an example of the company I sold, the larger company I sold, we ISO certified the company, which was unique in the space we were in. So at the end of the day, I ended up with a manual of how to run a business. I didn't write it. I had wonderful people that wrote it. But when you take your company to market, you go out there and you tell people what's the unique, what I call the unique selling propositions of your business. It's no different. Most people that have a successful business can sit in a pretty quick minute and tell someone what their business is and what they do. And usually in there, if you're successful, there's something unique about it. In our business, we'd go tell people that we were ISO certified and here's what it meant to the customers. So oftentimes those pieces of what you're out there selling when you're marketing your business is the same pieces you need to use when you go out and sell your business. You know, it's the same benefits of your business you're presenting to customers. And in our case, process, I think process in a business is a huge value if it's unique in what you've created.
Thank you, Joe. So starting to think about, increasing the likelihood to get to closing on a deal. Bill, I'd love to pose a question to you. Beyond the financials that you talked about, what operational or leadership red flags cause buyers to discount value, even when the business might look strong on paper? And what could sellers address earlier on to increase that value?
Well, I'll start with a couple that are pretty obvious. And I have, having lived through this in a very complicated technical business, the chain of custody in IP is critically important, which Linda mentioned. You have to know who's touched your intellectual property along the way, especially the more technical your business is. Another one is taxes. Making sure that you filed everything, that you understand what your risks are. You better know what your nexus is and things like that. That's also something that will haircut your value. One of the companies I tried to sell, the buyers, private equity firm, came back and asked for an outrageous indemnity around escheatment, of all things, right? We were holding customer money, and the question was how much of that is really, if it was an uncashed check by a consumer, was it escheatable under? And we went through all of those kinds of questions. So you need to, back to the panelists have said, you need to know your business. So those are three that I think are really important. Another one that may not be so obvious, it's the hero syndrome. Does anybody know what that is? It's a business that's too dependent on one person. And that means you've created a nice job for yourself, but you haven't created a business that has value because it's hard to capture that when you go to sell. Technical deficit is another one, where if you have antiquated systems and processes like Joe was just talking about, they'll look at that and want to discount it. Another thing, I'm advising a company on this now in the life sciences space. They thought they would sell to a strategic at a very early stage. Far too early. I used to work for a strategic in that space. And they will discount the heck out of the purchase price. You'll never capture the value. And so you need to think about where you are in the business life cycle. Revenue quality is another one that's really important. Customer concentration, your terms, your pricing. When was the last time you priced? All of those things matter and matter a lot, right? Is your business dependent upon big projects? How much of it's recurring versus non-recurring? There are a myriad of questions that matter there. And then the last one that I'll end with is turnover. How long has your team been together? Who's recently left? What's their morale? Have you done a survey of employee happiness, that sort of thing? We used to call them climate surveys at the company I was with, right? And if you've got a bunch of jaded employees who are posting on one of the different job boards that are out there, Indeed, for example, and trashing you as the business leader and owner, you probably have a problem because that stuff's going to come out there. So you need to look around and make sure you've got all those things captured.
Thank you, Bill. So Linda, the next question will be for you. What do sophisticated buyers scrutinize most closely during the diligence process that founders often underestimate or overlook? And with that, where do you see deal flow slowing down or deals slowing down or falling apart?
So sophisticated buyers are really wanting to make sure that what they saw in the teaser, in the sim, in the marketing materials is really what's there, right? And so they're going to put your contracts under the microscope. They're going to make sure that you have your IP assignments. They're going to be looking for legal and compliance risks. So are there regulatory and compliance issues, especially in highly regulated industries like healthcare or other sensitive industries? In terms of material contracts, do you have key customer contracts that are weak or should have been renegotiated prior to starting your process? They're really looking at, are there non-assignable contracts or change of control provisions that are going to be triggered upon a sale. So all of those things, buyers are really going to look under the hood, kick the tires, and really put your your contracts and corporate documentation under the microscope. In terms of where deals slow down or fall apart, it's really surprises and diligence, right? Buyers don't want to be surprised. The story needs to make sense. Your narrative needs to be coherent. So when you don't disclose something material, and the buyers are going to find out, and that's that can really rub buyers the wrong way, and they could even walk away. The other is disorganized responses from your advisory team and management, right? So during management presentations, is management saying something and then the legal documents say another thing, or your advisors are not aligned? That really is not a good look. And then the other is just unresolved, structural and tax issues, when there's not enough time, when you don't have enough time to do this pre-sale health check. These are the kinds of issues that come up. And I think just here it's surprises really erode trust. That's really the biggest one, I think. Surprises are just never good. So.
Trust is a big topic right now. So Joe and Shirin, you both spoke about strategics and PE buyers. So there are many types of buyers out there, including family offices, public, strategic, PE, etc. And each of them align very differently to a seller's exit goals and needs. What type of buyers did you seek? And can you offer any advice as you look back on that process? Shirin, would you like to start?
Sure. First of all, I think I've heard a lot of people ask about PE as if PE is one thing. It's a whole industry. It's like saying, how's manufacturing? I don't know. Depends on which manufacturing sector you're looking at. It's the same idea with PE. Not all PEs are made the same. Not their philosophy is very different. Their culture is very different. Their approach is very different. When we set out to sell the company the first round, we cast a wide net. We just wanted to see what the landscape looks like. There are definitely family offices, there were strategics, there were private equity firms. We ended up with private equity. The first time around, we worked with private equity to continue to grow. And then the second time, when we finally exited, we sold to a family office. And since then, when I've worked with other companies, we've done all. Private equity, strategic. At the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have clarity as to why you're doing this transaction. What's the objective? Do you want to stay on board? Are you doing it to raise funds? Are you raising funds to grow? Are you raising funds because you're in trouble? Like, what is the reason? Be very clear on that. But just as importantly, you've got to be very clear as to who you are. Because at the end of the day, whoever you bring in, it has to be a culture of fit. And I don't even care if you're moving on. This is still your company that you want to hand off to someone else. You've got to make sure that they have all the right approaches as you intend for it to be. So we took our time. The first time around, we had an excellent cultural fit. That's the reason why they kind of stayed out of our way. Their philosophy was, we're not operators, good luck, you guys do your thing. That's what worked for us because we had grown the company, we were entrepreneurs. It was because of that it was a successful relationship. But there are others that could very well roll up their sleeves and get in there and operate and help you operate, and they could be useful too, or either one of those could backfire. At the end of the day, you've got to know why you're doing it. You have to understand you have many, many options. It's not, the one size does not fit all, and you have to know who you are so that you can recruit the kind of people that you can get along with.
Thank you, Shirin. Joe.
Can I just repeat what she said? No, I think you really did. You did it beautifully. I think most you got to look at. There's two pieces of the equation. First, you got to figure out once you get past the value, because obviously you're selling and you want to get some fair value for your business, and then you got to look and say, what do I want to do with it? And then I think you got to get to know the people you're selling to. We can go on. It's too short of a time here to really talk about pros and cons between private equity, strategics, and all the other different kinds of buyers. But I think ultimately you got to look at it personally and go get to know the people you're going to go. If you're going to go to work there, if you're not going to go to work there, what's the deal look like? What's the relationship look like? And make sure you're comfortable with that from the standpoint of who the people are, because that's everything. That's where most of these things fall apart down the road, is that there's some mismatch with the people.
I'd like to add one thing. So we're talking with somebody, she's in Colorado, she runs an ad agency, wants to sell it. And we're talking about advising her the preparedness that we're talking about. And she wants to start her process by reaching out to 12 to 20 people who could be buyers to do exactly what Shirin and Joe just talked about. She wants to sit down with them, look them in the eye, just have a conversation about, hey, if we were to do something, what's your business like? How do you operate? That sort of thing. It's all about the fit. And is it going to work for her people and for whatever role she has in the combined company? That's really important.
Thank you so much. We held an event 2 years ago, and the whole topic was life after the exit. And we could speak about that for hours, but I will pose just a few questions on preparing for the transition. And Shirin, I'd like to ask you, in hindsight, were you personally prepared for life after the exit? Was philanthropy and writing a book an intentional goal for you?
Not at all. I was very, very unprepared. I think what happens, and I think you would agree to this, when you're going through a transaction, you have a second and a third job. You have to run the company. You have to make sure that you're continuing to show profit. You're doing well. It's a rigorous process. Due diligence is not fun. So I was doing all of those things, making sure that the teams are taken care of. Kind of in the back of my mind knew that I would move on, but I hadn't made any plans. And that's a problem. Because you don't have, it's like when somebody is doing a race, they don't end up at the finish line and just stop. They go for a little while. Yet we're expecting ourselves as executives, as people whose every minute basically is accounted for, and you're busy all the time, to wake up one morning, not have 350 emails already waiting for you, and figure it all out. Transitions are very, very hard, extremely hard. In my case, I was fortunate enough to have already been invited to be on boards. But honestly, philanthropy, I think that's where I oftentimes think that helping others seem to be being of service to others, but it's really self-serving as well. Because it helped me, at least, create an opportunity to use what I had learned to try to help others. So for me, philanthropy was a lifesaver. Of course, I was involved on for-profit boards. I've invested in companies. I've helped other companies grow in the meantime. The idea around creating a next phase of life is a tough one. It requires really a lot of self-reflection, asking yourself the same questions I would hope you ask as an operator, as a CEO. What am I doing here? Why would people want to utilize my talents? Who am I, and where do I want to go? So those questions you'd have to ask, and they're much more difficult to answer when you're on your own. But I did, and eventually, based on the feedback that I received, in fact, it was my children that sat me down and said, "Mom, write a book, because it's time to write a book. You can't help people individually." That was the idea around the book, to reflect on lessons learned and principles that I learned to try to help others with a roadmap so that they can also build and grow. So it naturally ended up there, but I wish I had better planning ahead of time so that I wouldn't go through all of the challenges that I ended up going through. People end up having all kinds of health issues after stepping down because it is that tough an adjustment.
When we had our event 2 years ago, one of the people said that they were so unprepared, they forgot that their cell phone plan was part of the company, and all of a sudden they didn't have a cell phone anymore. They were not prepared even from that standpoint.
Totally, yeah. Laptops, everything.
Everything.
It's amazing. Contacts,
Car, the whole bit. So Joe, we had an audience question that we built into this, and the question was, is taking a small stake in the new company worthwhile from a psychological standpoint?
Well, that's a good question. I think you got to look at what your personal goals are. If you're trying to do it just to stay tethered to something, I think you got to think through. Go back to step A: is why am I even selling the business? Most people told me when I sold my business, and I said I'm going to stay on. I was all excited to go and do some big M&A work for a much larger entity, and everybody said to me, "Hey, it's not going to work. You know, you'll be out of there in no time." And I thought about that for a while, and I even offered my resignation 2 months before I sold the business. I said, "I don't think this is going to work." I met the people I was going to work for. I said, "This is a bad fit." I was very honest with them. Said, "This is a bad idea. Let's rethink this, and you guys will be better off and be a happier buyer with me out of the way." So did I still want, it's what we were just talking about. You got to think about what you really want to do with your life. I mean, it's once it is life, it's more than the fact you're going to get a bunch of money, hopefully. And now you got to think what you're going to do with your life, and you're going to be happy with your life. And if the thing you're trying to solve by tethering yourself still to that business, because that's your life, your identity, your purpose, you need to think through those things. Sometimes it comes with the deal anyway. They want you tethered there. So you got to decide whether you're going to be happy. And it goes back to some of the stuff that Shirin and I have been saying. I think you got to figure out who you're going to work with and see if you're going to be happy doing it.
That's really good advice. Don't stay on just for the sake of not feeling comfortable stepping away. That's good. That's really good advice.
Okay, we're going to do a lightning round and then turn to the audience for questions. So get ready. Okay. So for anyone who wants to respond, what would you say is the one piece of advice that you'd want to give a founder who believes an exit is still very far off? Linda.
I would say act as if an exit is going to happen in a year, and start organizing your contracts. Start talking to potential advisors, and get the right advisors on board.
I want to say you're never for sale and you're always for sale. So build a company as if you're never selling it. It's going to be here forever, and be prepared at any point in time to present a case so you can sell.
Same said. You've always got to be running your business like potentially you're going to sell it. Unless you're giving it to your kids, but even then, there's probably some exit personally for you. So you got to have it, in some preparation that it's in good shape. You got to run your business well. And a well-run business is always in good shape to be sold.
The only thing I would add is I sit on some boards. One is a company run by an 82-year-old guy. His wife is 84, and they own all the voting shares. We talk succession planning all the time. You never know when you're going to need to transition a business. So, always be prepared, right? You don't go through life and don't have a will and things like that. You need to be prepared, and that includes who's going to run your business if you're not there. Like that, you have to change your mindset. That's the way I look at it.
That's a good one.
Thank you. So for the founders and entrepreneurs in the room, I'd like to ask the panel, if someone here takes just one action in the next 90 days to improve their future exit, what should they contemplate?
I would say get your owners on the same page about what a good deal looks like to you.
I want to say go build a really good business. Buyers will come.
Yeah, keep running your business well. Even if you get involved in a sale process, you got to run your business, and the business has to run because it may not happen. You may not sell it.
I think I would look in the mirror and go back to some of the things that Joe and Shirin said about, are you really ready to sell? What are you going to do? What's life going to look like? And spend time reflecting. Go take some time away and answer that big question, because that drives you to where you want to go. I joined a company, we were public. We went twice to sell. We went 0 for 64 with 32 strategics, 2 different times. That's disheartening, right? When you're getting turned down by the biggest companies in the world in the space that we were in, we finally found the 1 in 65 to get a deal done. We weren't ready to sell as a public company. We were not ready to sell, and people could see it. Team wasn't on all the things that could be the opposite of what you heard from us today. So that's what I would tell you to do. Go and think and reflect on what you want to do, what do you want to get out of it, who would you like to sell to, and what do they have to be like for you to put your employees to work with them.
Thank you all so much. This was so valuable. We'd love to turn to the audience and have you pose any questions that you have. We know that we just barely touched on the topics. Oh, come on. Gentlemen in the back of the room, hold on. We've got a microphone coming towards you. Okay.
So a question for the panel. If you had the time and the energy and the desire, what would you start today? What do you see as an opportunity in the market, a need or a gap to make a difference?
Are you talking about what industry to get into? No, just generally speaking.
Industry, product, fit for you?
I'm an investor. I invest in companies. And I want to say I want to work with someone, regardless of what industry it is, where they have very clear understanding of why their product or service is of value to the market. So don't go build a business because you feel like it's the right business to build. Maybe there's a lot of conversation around AI-driven. Sure, some people do well in that, but don't go build a business because you're hearing AI is doing well. Go build a business where you know exactly why your customers or clients will be interested in what you have to sell or offer. When I know a founder or an owner understands that value proposition, then I feel like it's a worthy investment.
Do you see anything specific right now?
There are many very good examples of companies out there that are doing great innovative work from things that may not be as sexy right now, called consumer packaged goods. Even though anything related to consumer may sound like it's not doing well, there are some shining stars in that space that have done really well. Obviously, a lot of technology, obviously a lot of medical tech. There are so many opportunities out there that are outstanding. But again, to me, it goes back to the founder and the operator and how well they understand their business and how what they say is about something. An example that somebody used that I thought was fantastic is when you go sit at a coffee shop and you see people come and go and they say, you hear someone say, I want to start a donut shop because I see people coming in here drinking coffee and asking for donuts. That person understands there's already a demand in place. They've already observed it. Same is true with much more complex businesses. If you understand the demand in the marketplace and what you're providing will have demand, you think you're solving for something and you understand it, then to me that's a worthy investment. Anybody else before we take the next question?
Okay, over here.
Just 1 second, we're recording, so we'd love to help for your question.
Can you speak to the mental? One of the things when you sell a new company is what's the mental of the leadership? How prepared are they? And oftentimes when maybe there needs to be a shuffle in the C-suite. Can you speak to oftentimes how that could be a positive or negative, and when oftentimes you need to maybe pull somebody back or pull somebody forward from the team, and how that can impact a transaction and either enhance or decrease the multiples that one would expect?
As I said earlier, you got to run your business well while you run a process, and you can't hide anything. People figure it out. So it's as simple as that. If you got weakness on your team, if somebody does a good job in doing their due diligence, they figure it out. And so you're better off just being upfront about it and saying, "Here's why we're making a change." I explain. I had one particular person on my team that was weak in it. I just told them why. We're struggling there, and we're not going to make a change right in the middle of this because it was the time to make a change for it, so we carry in the business. I said, maybe it's an opportunity we integrate the business with your business, that we we make the change happen. Hopefully you guys and players on your team can fit the gap.
100%.
But people figure it out.
100%. Like, own where the weaknesses in the organization are and what you solve for them. That's part of the reason you're bringing in investors, right? Part of the reason is there are gaps in the organization that you feel like working with someone you can potentially fill. But be upfront, own it, know what it is, have a plan around it, and they understand it. And actually, I think you do that in this, you do better for the value fund.
But I think you need to be on the same page with the buyers. We were involved in a situation with the company where the seller had a CFO who was going to retire. And the buyers were trying to raise money. They were content to let that person stay in place. And guess what? Any investor that was going to put capital in the company wanted to bet on the team that was going to be there after the deal closed. But no one wanted to make the change. They didn't want to call the problem a problem. And that deal never got funded. As far as I know, the transaction never got completed. It listed us.
All these responses tie to the trust topic. I do want to say in our case, we had our value figured out, locked down. It was only after that that almost all the C-suite was bought out. So we were well aware that it was going to move on. Even after they had their initial bid, they stayed with the bid because, again, we talked about the plan.
Just one more. First of all, thank you guys. Like the generosity of your wisdom and your insights. I mean, it's amazing. I think everybody's feeling it. It's pretty incredible. My question is, diligence. Shirin, you talked about how painful diligence is. People don't really realize that. When you're an entrepreneur, the idea of being an entrepreneur is amazing. And then you get into it and it's like, what the hell did I just do, right? It's unbelievable, the workload. What does the workload look like from a lift and the effort when you start to go through diligence in your world? How did that materialize, and what should people be thinking about? Manage expectations here. How much additional work is it? The fantasy of an exit is amazing. What's that work look like?
The workload is take whatever you're doing times 2. It is hard. Even though we had excellent, competent C-level executives, especially the second round, we had great general counsel, we had great legal teams, we had a robust accounting team. But at the end of the day, they have to do their daily work and at the same time respond to relentless questions, right? And I don't blame the buyers because they really have to understand, kick the tires. These are large sums of money they're putting in. They want to understand that what we say is true, find potential challenges here and there. In some respects, find some challenges so that you can negotiate for a lower price. So it is, you have got to be prepared. Even as CEO, you're not responding to those, but your teams are. So you have to, in advance, really think through the additional workload. This is why experts would be significant. They'll be very important in the process to help lift some of that. But reality is that it is painful. The more in advance and ready you are, the better your records are, the less painful it's going to be. But it is painful when it's just a period of time you have to live with.
I go back to what Linda said at the beginning about being prepared, especially on the customer side. Having a virtual data room, you track the need one number of outlets and what it should be, what the folder should look like, and all of that. It's really important to minimize the amount of work. I would say 2 things. One, you darn well better as a quarterback internally who's getting things into the VDR. That's absolutely critical. And then the other thing, having been the person who's dealt with the buyers, right, as the CFO of multiple companies, you end up having to be, you and the bankers have got involved. Somebody's got to be wrangling. We do a lot of raising money for people as well. Same thing. Somebody's got to be quarterbacking the questions that are coming in. You're giving everybody the answer back at the same time, so you do it once. You don't want to do things one-off. You don't want to do things multiple times. You want to manage that process. And so people are going to try and play all sorts of these psychological games with it, right? You know, is your man? Because they think you're weak. You're trying to stop. You have to be strong and you have to be organized. You have to stick to your guns, whether it's you or the banker. To Shirin's point about having somebody else be the bad guy. It's often not bad to be the bad guy if you're financing.
Honestly, this is where bankers are so important. Literally say nothing, but all the communications through the bankers. You do not want to email back without the bankers included. That's their job. Even when you do your management presentations, you rehearse it 500 times in advance so that you make sure everybody's aligned. telling the truth, but telling the truth in the same fashion and the same way that the information has been presented in the sim. So definitely bankers are going to be a savior in this process.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. Go ahead.
I think this is for Joe and Shirin. Wondering, did you have a board of directors or board of advisors when you sold your company? And if so, what role would they play in the sale?
I've had board of directors. I also got an ESOP trustee. So the roles they had approved the sale. They were, I would say, I had control of the interest in the business. But regardless of that, yes, I'd say two things. One, they were trusted advisors in it. And go back to what Bill just said. It can be an emotional roller coaster. Let's face it, you're selling something. Psychological side of selling something, especially when you're like a competitive person that wants to win and understand most negotiations. At the end of the day, a good negotiation, both sides don't get exactly what they want. So you're going to lose something in there. That's the up and down of it. So a board to me, and a good board, in a lot of cases, these are proven trusted advisors. You need someone to pick up the phone, the ball, and say, "It's not exactly the norm way to talk about it." And sometimes talk you off the ledge. You're not going to be always right in it. The ESOP trustees, now the story that's it's you can be very adversarial at times. So if you're running an ESOP company, they're Japanese and they're not necessarily trusted advisors.
So in our case, we had a very robust board of independent directors, and where they came in was a very good sounding board. And the idea we would bring in challenges and issues to them, and we had diversity of thought. People came from different industries and from different perspectives, so we could hear them out and understand and flesh it out. Though I want to say, unfortunately, even though it was a great board and I really liked them and they really did help in the process, at the end of the day, CEO's job is very lonely. You really don't have peers. The board you report to, and they have responsibilities, they have very governance challenges. They can't really openly talk about what you may be concerned about, even though you're open to them. And your executives are not your peers. So it's a very lonely place to be if you're not careful. Finding the right advisors to lean on was helpful to me in my process, and that's the role I play for some CEOs now.
Okay. Thank you.
One more last question.
I'll make it a fun one. Okay. How do you guys manage egos of entrepreneurs?
Look, the entrepreneurs are not answering.
I don't think you manage it. I think you just you got to understand what's in the room you walk into, and accept the fact, especially if the success of the business oftentimes is the success of that person, and just understand what that is. It goes back to, if they're coming to work with you, then it's another story. But you got to figure out, can the two people coexist? But no,
that's at the heart of it.
Yeah,
that's at the heart of it. I think you've got to make sure that if you're stepping in saying yes, I'll do it, or if you're putting a transaction where the entrepreneur is to stay on board, you really have to be realistic. Is this going to work? Is this person going to really report to someone else? Is that going to be a good mix? And oftentimes it isn't.
you have to realize you're buying that person's success oftentimes, so you got to really evaluate what that is you're paying for.
Yeah, I'll actually tie your question together with Guy's question a minute ago about board of directors. So, trying to end on a funny note. So you got to manage the personalities. And in my situation, I was the CFO of a company, the one that went 1 for 65. We had a strong board. They were guiding us. They were also retrading things with the other side's CEO, because it was a cash-constrained environment. And the biggest ego we had to manage was the CEO of the company I worked for, who was adamant, because it was all tied to incentives, which matter a ton in all of this process. I was insistent the other side was going to get the deal done because they all had incentives in their contracts to go public. A lot of money by a certain date in cash was going to get paid to them. I'm like, there's no way they won't close. Our guy, on the other hand, had a big cash payout coming. maybe not a golden parachute, a bronze one, but nonetheless a payout. And he's like, they're never gonna close. I'm like, shut up, right? Like, not that blunt, right? But I'm like, I disagree. And I jokingly would tell people that I was like one of the astronauts in Armageddon. Up on the rock, I don't know which one I was, but my board had their finger on the trigger to say we're gonna dissolve the company because we're running out of cash. I was like, we're gonna get this deal done. And it was all about managing personalities, remembering all of this. And I said, we will find a way to get there. We're gonna borrow money from there, we're gonna get it done. And ultimately, whether he got paid his severance or not, I don't care. Our shareholders got to live another day. And that was my loyalty to the company. I could have left many times to do something else. Ultimately, we got it done, and here I am, so.
Okay, now this is really the last question.
Bill, good to see you again, Bill. But what you're illustrating is a kind of a misconceived idea of the ego of a business owner or founder, right? People think they're egomaniacs or they're narcissistic, right? A lot of business owners I work with, that may be the initial impression, but, and thank you for all of you, what you guys have done, but really in their heart, they're a suffering servant. They're really looking out for their employees, they're looking out for the company, they're making an impact in the community. Oftentimes maybe a brother or a sister or aunt is depending on their excess income to provide. So they're really providing and really caring for an entire community. And oftentimes they're a suffering servant. Yes, they're strong, type A personality and other things, and ego helps that. But in their heart of hearts, they're suffering servants, serving the people they love and care, not narcissistic necessarily.
Thank you for saying that. One thing that's so interesting. I wanted to respond with that in mind. Part of the reason after 20 years, when we sold, I was able to step away, even though it is difficult when you're so involved with something. My DNA is in the company is in my DNA. How do we separate the two? Was to focus back on the reason why, the North Star that we had discussed and created as a company. And our North Star was making sure every franchisee is as successful as they want to be. So the question I asked myself, would these franchisees be able to build the lives that they signed up to do? Can they pay for their kids' college? Can they retire? Is this a good opportunity for them? And when the answer to that question was a yes, with the people that were stepping in, then I could step away. So I don't, in that case, I think if you know your mission and why you're doing things, it's probably not going to stand on your way.
Can we give the panel a big round of applause? Thank you all so much. Leave your mics there. Okay, so our last segment will be led by Matt Petroski, who is a partner at Armanino, a national accounting and business consulting firm. He comes to us with 25 years of experience in the industry and will be leading a discussion on charitable tax strategies for you as you consider planning for your exit. So, Matt, welcome.
Thanks, Margita. Great to be here. This is sort of the don't forget about this part segment as you're getting to the end and you're looking for that transaction. So by way of background, as Margita said, I've been 25 years in the industry. Before Armanino, I was with PwC for about 18 years. I've worked with some of the largest nonprofits in the country, startups, everything in between. One of the aspects of what I work with is also some of my partners with their high net worth clients, business owners, and a lot of their charitable giving. So it's that piece of one of the questions was asked was, well, what do I want to do? Where do I want to lead? What are the things I want to do with my life? And for a lot of people, it leads to charity, where they'd like to leave their mark. And so then the next question is, okay, how do we do that? When should we be thinking about that? And as you're getting to a business exit, that's the perfect time. It's a liquidity event. And with liquidity comes a significant amount of gain. So it's important to look at possible options, things you can do. If you're able to plan in advance and you're able to kind of avoid one of the things. So obviously the two main tax parts of charitable giving is, do I get a deduction and can I avoid any tax? So appreciated property is one of the best things you can donate. So if you think about it, these business owners, they have there's property that's appreciated. It's the stock in your company. And so planning ahead before the LOI is to be able to make those contributions. You can have a significant impact where you're able to contribute at that fair market value and not ever having to pay the tax on that gain. So I think that's something that a lot of business owners need to be thinking about. And then a lot of it comes to the different types of vehicles. So there's a number of different ways that we can give. I know a lot of people that might give directly to a charity. Here, maybe we start thinking bigger. If you don't have a donor advised fund, start thinking about the donor advised fund space. When I talk about the tax bill, I'll mention why I'm seeing a little bit more of that now. Maybe you want to start a private foundation. Maybe you have a private foundation, and I see a lot of private foundations where they prepare for that liquidity event where the business will be sold and significant amount of assets will be put in there. Then kind of that question is, if you're starting up a private foundation, is that what you want to do? It's running a business. It's running a business of a charity. You're doing all the investment planning, because that's essentially a lot of larger private foundations. They're just like endowments. So you're running an endowment, but you're also grant making and maybe also planning in other aspects. The private foundations have a lot of strict rules, and usually I say because someone somewhere along the lines did something wrong. You can't pay for your kid's wedding out of a private foundation. Things are pretty clear to a lot of us. Not everyone who owns a private foundation necessarily thinks that way. So maybe is that the right vehicle? For some individuals, they're thinking long term in that the charitable planning perspective. So do they want to set up a charitable remainder trust where they're going to get the deduction now, and eventually the remainder will go to that charity because maybe somebody needs the income during their lifetime. It could be a charitable lead trust. It's a big asset. You want it out of the estate. So it will pass to your heirs out of the trust. So it'll stay out of your estate, but then the charity's getting the income during your lifetime. So there's a lot of different things to consider, but especially planning around a stock event, you need to make sure you have a valuation and think about it ahead of time, and the type of vehicle. So I think it's kind of starting early. A lot of it gets to what do we want? What do we want? What do I want to do? And so that might lead to the vehicle, and it could be multiple vehicles. You could have I work with a lot of high net worth individuals who have they'll have charitable trusts. They'll have donor advised funds. They'll have foundations, and they all do different things. And so I think for business owners who are going on to that next step and think that that's an area where they'd like to get into, I think there's a lot they can do. Or it's something as simple as, I just like to increase my charitable giving. So I think that's something to consider. And if that's the case, any appreciated assets are really the type of thing that you'd like to contribute. As I kind of mentioned a little bit about the Tax Act, the one big beautiful bill that recently passed, charitable giving 2026 going forward is a little bit different. There is a 0.5% floor on donations. So basically that first 0.5% of individual donations relative to their AGI is non-deductible. So if it's something big, I mean, in the smaller stage, it could be minimal. AGI that's a little bit smaller, you may not notice it. But if, let's say, you want to make a $50 million donation, that AGI is $250,000. So the first $250,000 of your gift doesn't count for tax purposes. So what we're seeing a lot of is bunching of gifts. So really kind of thinking about modeling out how would I like my charitable planning to go from a tax perspective. Does it make sense for it all to be in 1 year? And if so, do I give it to the foundation? Do I give it to that public charity that I support directly? Or what we're seeing is a lot of donor advised funds coming into play. and being more popular, because you still have a little bit of that control of making sure you're not giving the charity too much money all in one particular year, but you're only having that hit from that floor once. And then you can still distribute out of your donor advised funds over a period of years. So I think that's something to consider. The other thing is there is a cap. So at the top tax bracket, the deductions are limited to the 35% bracket. So for anyone in the 37% tax bracket, they won't get the full benefit on the top end either. So I think these are things that I think we had a lot of conversations with people about accelerating 2025 contributions before these came into play. So I think that's, obviously it's a little late for that now, but I think now that we're living in this world, it's do we start bunching? Do we start using our donor advised funds? If we create a private foundation, and I have a lot of conversations with people about, at a certain level, how not to do it and why not to do it. You can pay your children to run the foundation, but that is a retirement plan, is not a great strategy. I've definitely heard that of someone wanting to sell their business and, hey, I can pay myself, so I'll just start a foundation. But remember, you can pay reasonable compensation, but there's other things that you just can't do as a founder of a foundation. So I think those are really, just from the perspective of think now, what are my charitable goals? There are a lot of different vehicles to consider and a lot of different ways to do the giving, but there may be better ways of doing it from a tax advantage perspective, and even just from a stress or cost. Maybe the vehicle that's chosen might be more expensive, but that might be the appropriate vehicle given the donor's expectations. I did include I think everybody at the table, it's a basic, really basic breakout of what giving appreciated assets would be. So if you're selling that business and making that contribution, what would happen if you were giving cash after the fact? What if you were giving the appreciated assets after, if you weren't giving anything? So I think what that shows is a little bit of the benefit of how you can impact your tax position after. I didn't bother including any of the tax acts, so I didn't want to complicate it by adding in the 0.5% floor. But I think they still do apply, and it is basic. And the one thing you know is normally the situation is more complicated, and very often modeling out what it would look like and what the best strategy would be is the best way to go. Great.
We can turn to questions in the audience if anybody has questions about tax advantage strategies during a business exit. Yes.
Thank you. You're with Armanino, right?
Yes.
Wonderful firm. One quick question is that on your handout here, for some of the transactions that I've been involved with, I'm doing pre-sale planning, there's additional 3.8% Obamacare tax. So it's really like 37%, right?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's sort of an illustration, but ultimately you'd have to go through the actual tax, and depending on states, and if you're adding in that 0.5%, but there are other taxes, and also you'd have to plug in the numbers. So I think this is just a basic illustration.
Okay. But to your point, with the new One Big Beautiful Bill Act, I quickly rushed through and got it done, where we had one of my clients transfer a large ranch and a piece of land, and we got it executed and done on December 31st to get them a huge 2025 tax deduction without having to take the 0.5% haircut. So we did it. Here's my question.
Sure.
My question is that I do a fair amount of defective charitable lead trusts, and with the appreciated assets, we use a capital gains bypass trust or charitable remainder trust. On a defective charitable lead trust, I normally fund it with cash. Okay, and so when we fund defective charitable lead trusts, like a couple of years ago, I was able to fund a a $2 million defective charitable elite trust, get a $2 million income tax deduction, and we only have to run it for 21 years to optimize it. Now with the interest rates higher, the 75/20 rate higher, now recently we're looking at a $3 million defective charitable elite trust. We've got to run it for 27 years, and charity is going to get $210,000 a year. I've always done it where I have it go to a public charity or donor advised fund.
Yep.
But I have someone who wants to split it between a public charity, half of it going to public charity, lead interests, the other half going to a private foundation, right? How do you account for the tax treatment on that? Because, to the private foundation, you can deduct up to 20% of AGI.
Right.
For public charity, 30% of AGI. So can you do that? Or how does that work?
I don't know if I've seen one structured that way. I'm happy to talk to you after and kind of work through that, but it is interesting. No, because you do have the two different AGI limits, and that's I didn't mention. So each of the vehicles you choose have different AGI limits, and obviously private foundations and appreciated property, non-cash property to private foundation, grant-making foundations, probably the lowest AGI. So I'd have to go through the ordering rules about whether you can get there and whether there would be any limitation to that.
Any other questions for Matt? Okay, well, Matt, thank you so much for your insights. The Orange County Community Foundation is super grateful for your attendance today. We're super passionate about doing good in the community, so we hope that you stay connected with us. Please continue to enjoy some dessert and food and drinks and continue networking, and please stay in touch with us. We would welcome that. Thank you so much.